In today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement, I'm going to talk you out of converting into the 32% bracket. So maybe you've thought about it, or maybe you think you should do it. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of this and the things to watch out for. Now, understand I don't know your specific situation, and it may make sense for you to do so. So if you watch all of this and none of it applies to you, that could be a great reason to understand why this could be beneficial for you. And now I will say we do have some of our clients who are doing conversions into the 32% bracket. And so understand it can be beneficial, but I do want to make it very clear. Most of the people watching this channel, most of the people that reach out to us from this channel, most of our clients, they have pensions and 1 to 10 million. They're in a niche crowd. They're in the 2% club we talk about. Only 10% of people have $1 million or more saved. Only 20% of people have a pension. That equals 2% of the population. And so they're very unique, but if you understand how the numbers work, if you have $5 million in a tax-deferred investment, and let's say you're 73 at RMD age right now, you have to take out about 4%. Well, you're still not going to be over the $425,000 amount that you need if you're married filing jointly to get out of the 24% bracket. So in that case, even with your RMD, even with your pension, because if you have a $5 million pension at 4%, that's going to be about $200,000 RMD. If you have a $100,000 pension, that's $300,000. If you have $100,000 that's Social Security, it's going to be taxable. You're still at $400,000. And so again, most of our clients don't end up in that 32% category down the line. So let's break this down further. I hope I've got you excited of what's in store today of Joe Knows Retirement.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
Hopefully that gives you some good understanding of what we're looking at here. Now, there's some things that I got to make sure we're very clear on. We don't know what tax rates are going to be in the future. Tax rates could go down, tax rates could go up, they could go sideways. We don't know. They could stay the same. I didn't expect tax rates to go down, and sure enough, here I am after the one big beautiful bill telling you about all these extra deductions. The bonus deduction, the standard deduction went higher, the lower tax brackets are staying in place, and now they're permanent. Again, it's likely not permanent, but it's permanent for now until they'd have to make a change, which it is going to be harder for them to change at this point, which is good for us taxpayers. But just to understand that tax code's written in pencil, so first thing we have to understand here. And so one of the biggest things that we want to understand with clients is where are they at now and where they expect to be at in the future. And that's really how we make these decisions of how much to Roth convert and should we go into the 32% bracket or not. And so let's first focus on what this looks like here. So like I said, if you are married filing jointly, about $425,000 married filing jointly, you can write off, or you can have up to income and only be in the 24% bracket. Now, everything's not going to be at 24%. It's only an amount. In the higher amounts, you're still going to have some in the standard deduction, which is $31,500 if you're married, and about half of that if you're single. And then also if you're single, the total amount to stay in a 24% bracket is $215,000. So still a larger amount there. And so we could see people who are single. We call this the widow's penalty, where for them it's more important to plan for this. Maybe those are the ones that are more likely to even consider the 32% bracket in some cases. So that may be an argument for that. But this is something we try to plan for our clients who are a married couple. And so if you think about it, if one spouse passes away, they go from married filing jointly to single tax brackets moving forward. And again, that's a significant drop off. I mean, you're basically going from getting $425,000 of deduction, or basically 425 to stay in the 24%, to now you're only getting half of that and staying in the 24%. But you may still have that same pension coming in if you selected a survivorship option. You have the same investments, so that required minimum distribution when you reach age 73 or 75 is going to come at you no matter what. The government's going to require you to pull that money out. They force you to, and as I always say, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing when the government forces us to do something, but that's how it works, and that's how we have to plan for it. So just to understand that if you are married filing jointly, this is more of a reason to use up this potentially 24% bracket to be able to ensure that when you pass, your spouse is not going to have to be left in those higher brackets and then those higher Medicare premiums as time goes on. And so that's those numbers I just shared are if you're under 65. So we do know with the one big beautiful bill, there's some changes, and we're going to talk about some of those in the video today. And so you can have a $15,000 total deduction for 65 or older now. if you're married, or $8,000 if you're single. So there's $6,000 per spouse, but also then they have the deduction that's already currently been in place of $2,000 if you're single, or $3,200 if you're married filing jointly. And so that's going to be a big benefit there. Now, the thing to be aware of, though, with this whole converting into 24% or 32% bracket is understanding your age and situation. And so, if you are, for example, 63 or older, we have to be aware of Medicare premiums. And you may think, Joe, Medicare doesn't start till 65. Well, it does, but they look at your 63 income to decide how much you should pay at 65. So this is a big concern for many of our clients who have a higher income with their pension, with their investments, or even those who are still working, because they may end up having to pay more for Medicare when they get to that 65 age year. So make sure you're aware of that. And again, going into the 32% bracket, you're not going to see necessarily any extra Medicare premium, so that could be a positive. But if you're going to go up to the top of 24%, you could potentially pay 4 increases in Medicare. And I'm going to pull up a chart here that we're going to talk through today that kind of talks through all of these details here. So the first thing I want to point out is these dotted lines on my chart here. So on these dotted lines shows you the extra you could pay in Medicare. So if you, for example, let's just say a Roth conversion, you convert, in this example here, you convert $200,000. If you convert $200,000 on our chart, what that says is that you don't have to pay any extra Medicare premiums. You stayed under that first tier, you pay the base premium, and you're good to go. If you were to convert an extra $50,000, as an example, you now have to pay an extra $1,000 per year per spouse. In this example, it's a married filing jointly spouses who we ran the numbers for. And then if you were to convert an extra $100,000, then you're going to be at $300,000 total. You're going to have to pay an extra $2,600 a year each spouse on top of the base premium there. And so that can add up pretty significantly just by that. And so if you're in all the way up to the 24% bracket, you can see you're going to have to pay an extra $5,800, and that's going to again be per spouse there, an extra $10,000 on top of that 24% bracket. And so there's a lot of math that goes into saying, hey, is that worthwhile or not? And so we always look at it of what the all-in tax is going to be on that conversion and where do we expect us to be moving forward. So you can make an argument for the 32% bracket based on what tax rates would be in the future. I mean, some people say that tax rates will double over time, knowing our deficit, knowing that our country likes to spend money. Some people can argue that. They may be right. No one knows. And so because of that, maybe it makes sense. Although, if we already know that the 24% bracket goes up to $425,000, let's say that, for our clients, we do have clients who have combined pensions of $200,000 or more. Maybe both spouses had a 6-figure pension, but most of our clients' pensions are probably going to be anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000 for the majority of our clients. We've got a lot of clients with 6 figures, but let's just say that's the case. Let's just use the 100K number because it's an easy one and it's very generous, so it's very conservative to go off of. If you have that, and let's say both of you had very generous Social Securities. Now we know with Social Security, in the example here, I'm not showing in them taking Social Security yet, but if you were to take Social Security, up to 85% of that will be taxable. Now, if you have a $100,000 pension, pretty much all of your Social Security is going to be taxable at 85% of that amount. So for example, if you had $100,000 Social Security, $85,000 would count towards income. It is how that calculation would work. So let's just say that both spouses had $50,000 of Social Security benefit. They came pretty close to maxing it out. They're at that $100,000 number. If that's the case, your total income is now going to be $185,000 due to that calculation. So now it comes down to, well, how much do you have in tax-deferred savings? Because remember, capital gains, if you have taxable investments, that's only going to be taxed at capital gains if you take it out or if you have dividends or whatnot, which we typically recommend our clients do tax loss harvesting or invest in individual stocks so we can be more specific about, hey, Coke's down, let's buy Pepsi, and really look to maybe make sure we're making the best tax decisions. And if you have non-retirement accounts and you're not doing that, highly suggest that you're looking into tax loss harvesting and trying to make sure you're offsetting those losses with gainers to make sure you're diversified or maybe look to get some tax benefits on that. Lots of opportunities with that. But let's just say you have $1 million in tax deferred and maybe you're 60 years old. Well, you can expect your $1 million to probably double by the time you're 75 5 when your RMD happens, hopefully over double. Hopefully the market gives us some upside there. But let's just say you have $2 million at that point. Well, we know it's about 4% is what we're going to have to take out for RMD. So that means we're going to have to take out $80,000. So we have $185,000. We add $80,000 from the RMD. We now have to, still take out less than $300,000. So, we're going to have to take out a total of $265,000 if I did my math right there. We're still well under the 24% bracket. Now, if you look at my chart here, we're probably just under the second tier there for Medicare. And so, not necessarily a terrible place to be, but we still have to pay an extra $1,000, and I'm going to be really worried about paying that $2,600 because as it go, my RMD percentage I'm having to withdraw goes up is how the IRS does that. And also if your accounts grow with market growth, you're going to have to take out as much more as well. If you have a cost of living adjustment on your pension, Social Security is going to go up. You're probably going to be paying more in Medicare premiums ongoing throughout your retirement is what we would expect in that scenario. But you can see we're not going to be in the 32% bracket, and we've got quite a bit of time before we were. So if tax rates truly are going to be permanent, you can see where we may not have to go into 32% because that's what the math tells us. Now let's do that same example. Let's make the numbers a little easier, but let's say you have a $100,000 pension. Let's say you have $100,000 of your Social Security is actually counted towards taxes. So maybe both spouses maxed out their Social Security benefit. Maybe they took it at 70 as well. So they got all the increases. And so you got 200,000 of income. And then maybe you also have, let's call it 5 million by the time you're 75 when you take RMDs. Well, in that case, your RMD is going to be $200,000. Well, in that case, 200,000 plus the 200,000 I already had, which again, not everyone has a $100,000 pension. Not everyone, both spouses maxed out Social Security. But in that case, you're still in the 24% bracket. Now you have to still pay a lot more in Medicare premiums, but your all-in tax rate is still going to be less than 32% at that point. And so you can see where you're going to have quite a bit of tax deferred. And again, most of our clients have 1 to 10 million. Again, they typically don't have all 10 million in tax deferred. I mean, that's going to be really hard to save all that. Maybe you invested in, Amazon before it was Amazon, or, bought some Tesla earlier on, or, whatever it may be. That's all possible, but you have to understand that it's going to be harder to have that amount of tax deferred for most of the people out there. So even though you are in the 2%, you are unique. We typically don't see that as much. A lot of people have at that point money in Roth or non-retirement at that point. So you can understand how that works and why we don't always recommend into the 32%. Now, we do have some clients that have closer to the $10 million in tax deferred, and I'll be make sure we're very clear on that. We are going into the 32% for some of them. Now, when you do go into the 32%, if that's you, you do have to be aware of understanding how this now works with the SALT deduction phase out. And so as you can see on the screen there that I'm showing on this chart, at $507,000 of income, basically $500,000, but you see where my cursor is at $507,000, that's where you have to pay an additional 9.6%, which is listed as a SALT deduction. So what's that mean? Well, they're now raising the SALT deduction from $10,000 up to $40,000. Now, this isn't going to be $40,000 for everyone. You have to have state taxes, local taxes, property taxes. All of that has to be up to $40,000 for you to get the biggest benefit. Now, if you're in New York, California, you may be more likely to do that if your income, is going to be higher. Maybe you are doing some larger Roth conversions. Remember, that's going to count towards that SALT deduction limit that you're going to be able to take advantage of that. So let's say you said, hey, I want to convert $1 million this year. You're going to now force your SALT deduction, that $40,000, to go away. And now you're going to be back to $10,000. And so this chart here, I don't have the full chart shown here, but basically from $500,000 to $600,000, you're going to see that phased out. And so once that $600,000 comes in, you're going to see 10%. So, if you are going to go into 32%, which by the time, you watch this video, most people, we don't suggest do that. But if you're going to do it anyways, just be aware that you may have to actually not even pay a 32% tax, because that's what bracket you're in, but you could actually pay a 41.6% tax because you're losing that SALT deduction between $500,000 and $600,000. So this is something we just recently found with one of our clients that we are looking at the 32%. So this is something you're definitely going to be want to be looking out for. So with them, we decided not to go over that 41.6%. We just don't feel like that's going to be the case. And so let me also kind of backtrack and talk about this, but also what we're talking about earlier. it's all about tax diversification. We may not want all of our money in Roth. We may just want a balance. And so for a lot of our clients, most of them have all their money in tax deferred. We want to start to change that from having this much here and this much in Roth or tax free to making it more balanced, so that now in the future we have the opportunity to choose where we want to take out money from if we need extra cash, or if maybe we want to leave a legacy. Maybe if we pass, we want to make sure our spouse is good to go. Now they can pull from the Roth at that time, so they don't have to increase their income at the single tax rates as much anymore. Or maybe we want to leave a legacy to our children, and maybe we don't want them to have to pay a massive amount in taxes on that. Well, if it's Roth, it's going to be tax free. And so that's all going to be beneficial things for them to consider of why you want to make sure you have some diversification there. But again, we don't want to, just because we can Roth convert everything we have, there's no limits currently. If you wanted to convert, $10 million, if you have that, you can, there's no limits on it. But we have to decide, does that make sense to go to the highest bracket if we may not ever be in the higher brackets over time? Unless tax rates increase, as we've talked about earlier, which could definitely be a consideration. And then the big thing with this too is just finding ways to reduce that RMD. Again, the RMD is going to get worse over time with the extra returns you're probably going to see in it, the higher withdrawal rate that they're going to make you do. And so in that case, you're probably going to be able to see that become a bigger problem as time goes. And so doing conversions is going to help with that. So I know a lot of you know the advantages of Roth conversions, and the majority of our clients are doing that right now. Not everyone is, it's not for everyone, but the 2% club is unique where it can make more sense. It just depends on how much, right? And so that's what we're ultimately talking about in the video today. So I hope this gives you some more clarity. And if this video was helpful for you, if you feel like, hey, I feel like this is the type of planning I'm looking for, I'm really not sure what to do on this, feel free in the link below. If you've been watching until this point, you can actually schedule a time with our team and we can explore working with you. If you're the type of person that's saying, hey, should I do a 32% bracket Roth conversion or not? You're probably the type of client that really values from the planning we do. Again, we serve that 1 to 10 million crowd really well, especially those with pensions that have a higher income over time with a higher net worth. So feel free to schedule time. We'd be glad to see if we could be a good fit, and hopefully enjoyed the video, and we've got some more coming your way. And if you want to get more information on the One Big Beautiful Bill, if you just click above here, we've done a video giving everything that those in or near retirement in that 2% club Midwestern millionaire need to know. So that's all I've got on today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement.